but kind of like some of the underrated stuff is more like those social skills, right? Like working in a team, being able to interact with other people, and communicating clearly, these are things that maybe you pick up in help desk if you've been working that. If you haven't, maybe go to school and you've worked some projects or done some extracurriculars. Maybe you haven't, you've been working other jobs where you're working with people. It's just really good to kind of have that, it's kind of like a muscle, like have that muscle worked out a little bit. So, whenever you're in a team environment, um, you know, you're not just kind of like taking your projects and like building this wall and not keeping everybody else at arm's length. It's super important to be able to work and interact in a team effectively, especially whenever it's this kind of like technical and like sensitive stuff.
Welcome to the Bearded IT Dad, where we give you advice and insight on how to grow your career in the IT field. My name's Dakota, and today we're going to be continuing our interview with Caleb from StudioSec. And we're going to be talking about interviewing tips when interviewing for a position in the cybersecurity field, and amazing advice on how to land your dream job in the cybersec field. So stay tuned, because all that and more is coming up after this. Kind of getting into like the job aspect, do you have any tips, like interviewing tips for someone going for that first cybersecurity role? Either they're branching off the help desk, looking to break into the cybersecurity field, or just jumping right on in. What can they expect in that interview, and how can they, improve on it?
Yeah, and that also kind of just varies, company to company. So it's definitely not, one size fits all. I've seen, I'll just kind of go off of like some of the interviews I've been in on, right? Some were definitely like they lean more heavily on the technical side. Some leaned a bit more heavy on, the intangible side, like the social side, and like can you work within a team? And I feel like, the technical side gets a lot of love and attention because it's really hard. So it's probably good that it gets a lot of attention. Obviously, you got to know your stuff. And if you, sure, there's going to be some holes. Nobody knows everything. We're all learning along the way. But at least a demonstrated willingness and desire to learn more, I think that definitely will really, pay dividends. But kind of like some of the underrated stuff is more like those social skills, right? Like working in a team, being able to interact with other people, and communicating clearly, these are things that maybe you pick up in help desk if you've been working that. If you haven't, maybe go to school and you've worked some projects or done some extracurriculars. Maybe you haven't, you've been working other jobs where you're working with people. It's just really good to kind of have that, it's kind of like a muscle, like have that muscle worked out a little bit. So, whenever you're in a team environment, you're not just kind of like taking your projects and like building this wall and not keeping everybody else at arm's length. It's super important to be able to work and interact in a team effectively, especially whenever it's this kind of like technical and like sensitive stuff,
Absolutely. What do you think is the biggest barrier to entry for people getting into cybersecurity?
My gut reaction wants to go so bad towards like job descriptions and like the really like aggressive descriptions that they put in. Like you got to have your CISSP or your OSCP for like an entry level position. That's kind of tough.
Yeah. I really hate that. I'll see an entry level job, it's meant for someone that has no experience, and they require like a CISSP. And for those of you who don't know, that's a certification you can't get until you've been in the field for at least 5 years of experience in the field.
Yeah. And it's like thousands of dollars. So it's very expensive.
Exactly. And that kind of goes to, a lot of times the people putting out those job postings don't know a clue of what it takes to actually do the job. And also a lot of times those job descriptions, I think, are more of a wish list. View them as a wish list and take them, with a grain of salt that, that's what they would like, but you never know. You might be the most qualified person that ends up applying.
Yeah. And I saw a really good tip that, someone mentioned is like apply to a position, even if you only meet 60% of what's in the description. I tend to do this myself too. Like reading a description, you're like, oh shoot, I don't meet all the qualifications. I probably shouldn't apply. Worst thing that they can say is no, and then you're exactly where you are today. So may as well just apply, and who knows? Maybe they check your application, they're super intrigued, and they see a lot of potential, and they go for it. I think another one of those like barriers is experience. I kind of looked out with my internships that it got me familiar with some tools and stuff like that I'd be able to use down the road that are pretty in demand. But, being able to get that experience, it can be kind of hard. Getting like IT experience is super helpful and invaluable. And I think that that's something to definitely, anyone that's watching that might be like, say they're like, going for their undergrad in cybersecurity and they're looking specifically for security positions. There are definitely internships out there, but it's a very sensitive field. And a lot of companies, like if they're not 100% sure that, or at least like 80, 70% sure that they can flip you to a full-time employee after your internship, then it might be a tough sell, just getting onboarded with the sensitive level of access that you're going to have. It's like getting some IT experience in I took like a data entry internship, super informative, and I learned a lot about, like a small business and their needs, doing that. And you'll get experiences like that, whenever you just kind of like open yourself up to other opportunities, still kind of within IT and tech that will ultimately feed into security where, you're getting some experience. So it's not just the fundamentals that you're checking off, but it's also, a lot of people are looking for experience, but it'll also just help, once you're in like an actual like business environment, you'll have some familiarity with that and it's not going to be like a deer in headlights.
Absolutely. Now, I'm huge about sharing resources and kind of growing our community. Do you mind kind of telling us a little bit about what you do on YouTube and the education and stuff you offer over there?
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of cybersecurity fundamentals videos. I kind of like started with that being the main thing. I have like 150 videos and like the cybersecurity 101 playlist. It's kind of silly. And then
that's amazing.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I grinded with the content and then I burnt out and then I'm back at it. But been doing a lot of cybersecurity news as well. And then we've got the podcast kind of interviewing folks, which I'd love to have you on at some point. I think that would be awesome. To get some folks, seeing you and getting to not only see your channel as well, but getting to hear your story. But yeah, so that's what I've been after. What's some advice that you would have for folks looking for like an entry level position?
My biggest advice is just to literally go out there and start applying. If you're looking to break into the field, you'd be surprised at the amount of skills you probably have that you don't give yourself credit for. I think the most important skill in the IT industry in general is your soft skills, your ability to communicate with others in a way that is meaningful. They can understand, but they don't feel like you're talking down to them. And so just having that customer service skills, and it goes to all parts of IT. Like if you're writing an incident report on a security event, being able to write that report in a way that the person you're writing it for probably doesn't understand a thing that you're talking about, but you can write it in a way that makes sense to them. Those kind of skills, I think, is the most important thing. And a lot of people think, well, I need to wait and get an entry-level certification, or, it's just not the right time for me to start doing this. And I say go out and apply, because I entered the IT field and landed like a $50,000 a year job with no college education, college dropout. I had no IT certifications at the time, and I had no formal job experience. And then within 3 years, I've been able to level up my career all the way up to a director level position as a director of network operations. So my biggest piece of advice is just go out there and apply. So
I love it. That motivates me.
Yeah. And that's my biggest thing. There's so many different paths you can take in this career field. If you want to settle in with something you're happy with, you can just stop, you know, moving and just stay in a position and settle down and enjoy your job. If you want to make six figures, I think that is completely achievable within 3 years of entering the field. I've seen it. It's just depending on your motivation and desire. You're not going to make that big of a pay jump just sitting with one employer. You will have to, unfortunately, job hop. Keep on moving up into that next higher position and more pay. But it just really depends on what you want to do.
Yeah, I really want to emphasize the point on being willing to jump employers. I did that recently and saw a bit of a jump there, so it was nice. And learning more. I think one of the big things that's also kind of underrated, not just with like compensation, but being able to learn and grow more in the role as well. I mean, obviously, that's probably if not the primary, then it's probably got to be like the secondary factor to it, right?
Yeah.
What do you think on that?
Absolutely. In my first job, I was there for 2 years. Like I said, my job role changed greatly, but at the end of that 2 years, I could tell there was not going to be any more advancement. There was not going to be any more pay. I was stuck, and I wasn't ready to be stuck in my career. I just started. So I ended up leaving that company. I went to work for a school district as a network engineer for a short time. Decided I didn't like all the politics involved with the school district. Every school district is different. I'm not trying to deter people away from that because I've heard a lot of great success stories, but the one I worked at was just, yeah. Anywho, so while I was sitting at my job unhappy, I decided to throw my hat to the ring for this. It was a network operations center technician position that I didn't think I was qualified for. I was like, oh, this is my dream job. I won't get it. It's a government, not a government job, but it's my company's owned by the government, so I have access to government benefits, which was great to me long term. I'm like, I won't get it. But I got called back. I had a phone interview, and then I'm like, oh, that was great. Thinking to myself, I completely screwed that one up. So, but a couple weeks later, I got called in for an interview, and then another interview. I got the position as a technician, and then 90 days in, my boss came to me and said, okay, you're out of your probation. We're going to keep you. We're going to hire you on full time. You've done great, but we also want to promote you to director of network operation. And that was just a shock to me. That's my dream job. So I've been running with that since. There's even been talk about moving up into just a director of operations for the entire organization already. And that's a year later. So it just goes to show, I think, if you work hard, you come to work every day with a great attitude, you're always willing to learn, because that is huge as well. Constantly learning in the field. But yeah, anything's possible. Sorry, I kind of went on a rant there and been talking about myself.
No, that's great. That's great. I mean, it's super, super educational and encouraging, I think. Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's why, I talk about it, because I want to encourage people, because it was a story just like mine that, convinced me to leave my job I hated. I was a bulldozer operator before I entered tech. I was making great money, but I hated it. It was so mind numbing. It was just, yeah, it just sucked. So it was a story like mine. And that's why I do this on YouTube, is try to help people realize that if this is what they're passionate about, it is really easier than they think, and they just need the right set of tools and guidance.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. There was on I remember this statistic. It was like over like 20 years, people that don't jump jobs. This is back to like the job hopping, I guess, and moving up. Right. I saw like a statistic on, and I'm really butchering remembering the statistic itself. But it was like
all good.
Over the course of like 20 years, like employees that didn't jump employers lost like 50% of the total pay that employees that did jump like once every 2 years, which is kind of
That's crazy.
interesting. Not to like say one's better than the other. Again, we were just talking about, in just a short amount of time, like you've had so much success in this position. So, it's really all about just finding the position that's like right for you. But
Yeah,
yeah,
and even more so, not the position but the organization, because no two organizations are alike. And there are the few diamonds in the rough, that the organizations that pay a above average salary or a decent salary and treat their employers good. And sometimes you got to weigh that when you're making your decision. Like, yeah, I could make a little bit more money, but am I going to be happy at that organization, or are they going to work my tail off and I'm going to be miserable? That's all things you got to think of when you're deciding, are you going to jump employers? Um, but like I said, unfortunately, I think the more common scenario is you're going to have to job hop to make the larger incomes.
yeah. What on the like good organization, right? Like, how do you how do you evaluate while you're interviewing whether or not an organization has like a good culture, and like the manager that you'd be working under is somebody that would be supporting you?
Um, it's just kind of I kind of read their personality. It's difficult when you're interviewing, because you're getting like a split second look into that company, and if you blink, you might miss an important note. But just kind of how they conduct themselves. Are they professional? Do they talk like they're expect the world out of you and you got to work hard, or do they listen to your opinion you bring to the table? Um, I really value that my company values my opinion. They really, no matter even if it's the dumbest idea I come up with, they'll still sit down and listen to it, and and they'll give me honest feedback as well. And you just, I don't know if I have a good answer on how to judge that. I mean, what's your thoughts on that? Can you tell during like the interview process if that company culture is going to be a good fit for you?
Yeah, it's so hard because it's the interview phase. It's like I want to say it's kind of like dating, but it's like you're both putting your best foot forward, and then like yeah, as opposed to like marriage where you're just together 24/7, and then it's like all like the rose colored glasses are off. It's like, oh, okay, you are a human being, and so like I think one of the things that like, speaking of being married, my wife like helped me with like the interview process, right, and trying to do those kinds of assessments was hitting people up on LinkedIn, and kind of asking their opinions and their stories. And sometimes sometimes people won't respond, but sometimes if they do, you'll get some pretty interesting feedback. I've dodged a couple bullets doing that. Where some people, and maybe it was just, I reached out to the wrong person, but they definitely gave some feedback that I was like, okay, well, maybe this isn't the right time or the right time or the right organization for me to be applying to right now. Yeah, and stuff like that. It's in the interview process. It's blink and you miss it. So definitely like taking notes while you're interviewing, and really, it's remembering that they're not only interviewing you, you're interviewing them. It's a mutual agreement for you to be there. So yeah, it's
There was so much great advice packed into that episode. I want to know, what are some of your guys' biggest takeaways from that episode? For me, and to be honest, one of the biggest points I want to try to drive home is, if you set your mind to making a change like this, you can do it. Just keep your eye on the end goal and you guys will be able to achieve greatness. Now, in next week's video, we're going to be wrapping up this series with Caleb by talking about ways to make top dollar in the cybersecurity field. So if you haven't already, make sure you guys subscribe, hit that bell icon so you receive notifications as soon as that video drops. Thank you all for tuning in, and I can't wait to see you in the next episode.